Afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here at this summit that's so focused on solutions. MallyaSilly Initiatives is very much a solutions-oriented organization. As Kristen said, we work with many of the outstanding African conservation organizations, work with them to help them achieve more and achieve more impact. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we see as an emerging new generation of African conservation entrepreneurs that are delivering the kinds of solutions that we're all thinking about and talking about here at this conference, the kind of solutions that we need to face up to today's conservation challenges. And I think a core purpose for the session that we're doing here today is really to think about what kind of support do those kinds of organizations need. How can we help effective local creative organizations do more and achieve more together? So just to take a look at the big picture in African conservation. Conservation, I think, is inherently entrepreneurial. It's really the business of social change, about trying to get people to change their behaviors, to do things, to interact with nature and their environment in different ways. At an individual level, at a community level, at a national scale. In Africa, you have the juxtaposition of tremendous biological diversity and rapid social, economic, and institutional change. And conservation in that context is really about getting nature to deliver economic value, benefits for local people, to create the incentives for them to change their behavior and protect nature and to be stewards. And that's the change that we need. That's the change that we need at scale. To make nature valuable to communities, to create the incentives for them to be stewards and to protect the natural resources that their lives and livelihoods and communities depend on. And if we want impact at scale, then we need change at that scale. But the question is, where does that change come from? I think the answer is that predominantly that change comes from organizations. It comes from groups of people working together in creative and different ways, in networks and coalitions and alliances and social enterprises, coming together and solving problems. And I think in conservation, fundamentally, we need strong, effective local organizations that can deliver change. I think this is something that's often overlooked in the conservation field. There's a lot of individuals, often small project individuals off with a great idea and maybe creating impact at a project level, but how do we bring those together? How do we grow those? How do we scale those up into something larger and more impactful? I think that's a key question when we're talking about entrepreneurship in conservation. How do you help organizations go to scale? And MallyaSilly Initiatives was founded really to address that and think about how can we help effective local organizations to grow? How can we help them to be stronger, to sustain and expand their work and their impact? We look for organizations that are working to deliver conservation in a systematic way, that really have stumbled upon something unique and a great idea and a niche about how they can change the world and change their communities around them. And we've built up a portfolio over the past 5 years of what I think are some of the best and most entrepreneurial African conservations out there, some of which are here with us at this summit. For example, in southern Tanzania, we've worked with the Mpingo Conservation and Development Initiative, which has really pioneered community forestry in Tanzania and indeed in all of Africa, working across over 800,000 acres and unlocking the value chain from sustainable timber harvesting and helping communities to benefit from timber, protect village forests. They have the only Forestry Stewardship Council group certificate in all of Africa and have been a true pioneer in that field with great potential to expand and help communities protect more forests based on the value those forests provide. Another set of social entrepreneurs in different parts of Africa that are unlocking values of natural resources are groups working to make the connection between forest protection and climate change through emerging carbon markets, such as Biocarbon Partners BCP in Zambia, which developed one of the only triple gold certified forestry carbon or RED offset projects over 40,000 hectares in the lower Zambezi Valley of Zambia, and now working to scale that up, aiming for a million acres in some of Zambia's most important wildlife areas. Tapping into global markets and making them work for local landholders to create the incentives on the ground that drive change. In Tanzania, a group called Carbon Tanzania has created a local carbon market from scratch, working with tourism companies, persuading them to buy offsets as a part of their responsible tourism businesses, and then channeling that funding to indigenous communities such as Hadzabe hunter-gatherers to provide them with resources to protect and steward their lands. That's the kind of creativity that we need in African conservation. Namibia is perhaps one of the most transformative examples of conservation entrepreneurship at scale. And IRDNC and John Kasona, who's here with us today at the conference and spoke earlier, have been the true pioneers in that, in making conservation work on a large scale and really turning on its head some of the assumptions and paradigms that drove conservation in the past. By granting local communities ownership and rights over wildlife and leveraging the economic value of that wildlife, they've enabled communal conservancies to expand over 50 million acres in Namibia, generate about $10 million from tourism and hunting and other sources of revenue per year. And I think core to that was really has been rethinking anti-poaching and protected area management and what's the relationship between people and wildlife to enable those changes to occur, to convert wildlife into an asset that can drive conservation in totally new ways on a new scale. And those kinds of ideas and models are spreading in different parts of Africa. In the Masai Mara National Reserve in Kenya, one of Africa's most important wildlife areas, you see new types of conservancies with individual Maasai landholders and some of Africa's leading ecotourism companies coming together and creating new joint ventures that integrate revenue from tourism, wildlife, livestock, and create new types of local conservation models that are rapidly expanding in that area and create the potential, the best hope really, for one of Africa's most important wildlife areas. In northern Tanzania, you see similar experiments to develop new types of conservancies. The Honey Guide Foundation trying to develop those and make those work in Tanzania across the border. So I think these are really a new generation of African conservation entrepreneurs that are working across different areas to unlock the value of natural systems, creating new solutions, creating new possibilities, new partnerships, new ways of thinking and doing, driving entrepreneurship in their own context. And I think that's really the conservation that we need today when we're thinking about conservation solutions. Now, the issue we want to raise is, and think about, if we think about these organizations and this kind of entrepreneurship as the key agents of change, as the key drivers of new ways of doing things, how are we in the conservation space supporting local entrepreneurship? How are we providing local organizations with the kind of external support or fostering entrepreneurship in the ways that we think and interact in terms of funding models, in terms of the skills to be entrepreneurial? Are we enabling local groups to do more? I think that's the conversation we need to have when we're thinking about how to drive solutions, and that's the conversation we also want to have here today. Thank you.